Welcome to the final day of freestyle chess in Las Vegas, baby. In this first game, we're looking at Levon Aronian versus Hans Niemann for the final. Levon's playing white. Winner of this game wins the entire event and $200,000. And then we're going to have a look at Magnus versus Hikaru, El Clasico for third place. Let's dive in. Levon kicks off with this D pawn. I was about to say E pawn. This is where freestyle chess plays with your head. Normally the king's here, it's the E pawn, but no, we get a queen's gambit. Now we see takes here, and the queen's already developed. Usually a bit of a boo-boo because it gets attacked like this. But the rules are a bit out the window in freestyle chess, but some remain the same. Get your pieces out and don't spend 11.5 minutes just to play the pawn push. It's what Hans Niemann does here. Now maybe he was daydreaming about three-armed Magnus Carlsen's warm embrace just yesterday. Still not ideal when you've only got 30 minutes plus 10 seconds a move. This is a really ugly one, blocking the pawn, and Levon just sets up this big centre now, gaining space all over the board. He holds off on pushing the e-pawn for now. Rook d8, castles, always fun to see it go miles across the board. And after h5, Niemann may be threatening to tickle down here or something. Not too sure the point of this move. We now see e4, taking control of the central space. Niemann needs counterplay, and he finds it on the queen side here. First pressuring the center, and then lashing out with pawn to b5. But already he's down to 7 minutes versus Levon's 25. This is nuts. e5, charging through the center. Great move. You could move your knight into c4. Looks so natural, but Niemann mixes it up with this captures. You take me, I take you. It's how the game proceeds here. And after takes on e7, the move to play not played is rook to d7. And the idea is, if you go knight b4 to double attack this pawn like we see in the game, you can crash through here. You know, takes and knight takes, still supported by the rook. Pawn can't push, covered by the bishop as well as the queen. So that was the way to go, rook d7. Not that white then had to play this, there were other good moves. But in the game we see this, and now knight b4. And there's no collapse of the center because the rook's not on d7. This one's attacked twice, and I dare you to try and push it. Looks so natural, right? To liberate the position. Why the sudden change in the bar? Can you find a tactic for white here? So well done if you saw the idea of sliding the queen one square, and if you capture that knight, you know, that was the threat. This isn't just check, it's actually mate, with the pawn taking squares and the bishop lapelling in the king. Amazing lines. So no pawn push. Instead we saw rook takes on e7 here. Now this pawn collapses. You wander into this pin, which is uncomfortable, but Levon's got it worked out. He thrusts through the center here, opening this tension as well. The knight's attacked, so it moves into this dangerous square. Double hits the pawn, but this is what Levon's got planned. He checks from here, and he's distracting this rook. You know, if the king moves, the queen's getting taken, and sure you can take here, but pawn's taken, you're winning an exchange. So Hans gives the exchange like this. Rook recaptures, queen takes. We see this liquidation of pieces now, and when the smoke clears, although black has got one extra pawn, they're an exchange down, right? Levon is now winning this game, but only if he can find one move and one move only. Otherwise, it's a drawing position. So he plays the move here of bishop to e4. And the idea is takes and the rook drops and white's winning. You know, the pawn can't advance. It just gets headed off and then captured. You can take here and swing round behind. Basically, the rook outplays the knight. So let's run back. We didn't see the knight take on e7. Instead, we saw the randomizer of pawn f5. Niemann down under a couple of minutes now. If you take Then, of course, you're distracting the bishop. You win the rook. So not played. We saw rook takes on f7. Another classy move. A brilliancy. Let me add that. Should have already added it. Because if king takes, well, then there's this. And obviously you win the rook in the corner. You're killing it. So we run back. We saw takes on e4 instead. The rook saves itself. Now we see this pawn advance with check. Again, this is an only move. Played. If you'd gone to e2, the knight's jumping with tempo. So this was how the game proceeded. Pawn g3, check. Now the king steps up. You know, you're not running back or anything. b2 is a nice little intermezzo, but the rook simply moves. Now this one gets defended, but king takes on e3 and Levon, slowly but surely, squashing Hans Niemann's counterplay. Take, fine, king moves, lose a knight. So instead we see this counter attack. These are just randomizers, right? Spite moves almost. This game is done. Levon ain't going to let this slip. And after pawn h3, he's a winner. Niemann resigns the game. The knight's got to give ground, go somewhere. And ultimately, you're going to round up this pawn. You know what to say. There's nothing left to be done. Everything's dropping. The rook outplays the knight. Even you're going to pick up extra pawns. So Levon wins the entire tournament. Who saw that coming? Beat Magnus, Hikaru, Arjun, now Hans. Wow, what an incredible run by him. Let's jump to this next game because this is the battle for third place. Hikaru's playing white, kicking off with this D pawn, and Magnus plays in this fashion. Also potentially bringing the queen out, but no, he defends with the knight. And if you try and defend the pawn, this wasn't played. There's this common idea we see in the Queen's Gambit. And say you go here to defend. Well, there's this, this, and this. And you're losing a rook in the corner out of nowhere. Obviously, if you try to defend with this pawn, you've got this classic idea where you win a rook down here. So, after knight e6, pawn can't be saved. This was therefore played. Now it's captured. Hikaru sets up the big centre. It's about to say Hans. Need to find the right game in my head. And pawn f6 is played. Very stinky. Hans Feingold does not approve. But you do open a bishop. Now queen d2. X-raying the king. Somehow Magnus understands this pawn push isn't good. But this knight hop is. Too deep for me. I struggle with regular chess. I think we all do, right? Which is probably why we prefer just watching regular chess. Most of us anyway, because this is just such a mind spin. And now Magnus keeps the pieces on the board, pressures the queen side. This one is such a pain in the derriere. He really starts turning up the heat now, understanding that he should pawn rush over there and just leave the bishops where they are. They're still influencing already from afar, let's say. Some terrible arrows from me. Now we see pawn c3 preparing to develop. This knight hits c4 and you could take immediately, but Hikaru decides to slide over. Now we get queen c7 and the sharpest, best way to play was knight f5. You threaten to crash with check, but you can also reroute to here where the knight's a bit annoying. It's a game. It's a different game. But Hikaru takes on c4. I lucked out there, slipping on the actual move that got played. Or did I mean to do it? No, I didn't. And after bishop captures, Magnus is goading this move. Again, can you find the tactical shot here that wins black the game? So the move to play is bishop takes on d3. But it's not actually about crashing through here in a moment, because after queen takes, it's all about going to fork Vegas. That one then collapses. I'm very close to sneezing here, excuse me. And that would be the end of the game. So bishop takes on c4 was played as mentioned, no b3. Instead queen d2 prepares to develop. Not a fun position though when you're going back and forth with your queen, your king isn't yet safe. So this was played by Magnus. He whispers, do you even rook lift Hikaru, bro? Now bishop c2 played, and an excellent move. The rook slides across, mounting on the pressure here. There's ideas of now crashing through. There's pins everywhere. Pressure, pressure, pressure. Not easy to castle. In fact, what to do, right? b3 is not working for the same reasons as before. If you try and go some kind of castles over here where we're just crashing through, This is one sample line. Wow, didn't even see that checkmate. This is what happens when you analyze on the fly. So you definitely can't castle this way. Nasty. What a battery. So Hikaru castles this way, thinking, okay, at least I cover the b2 pawn with my king. No knight takes. Bring an extra defender to d3, that sort of thing. But there's a problem with this variation, and it's bishop takes on a2. Clean pawn for Magnus, and that is not a happy bunny. We now see takes on a4. Makes things worse, but it's such a tough position. The rook saved as the bishop bounces round, and Magnus now goes for the spectacular castles here, moving 4 squares. He does it with a whoosh. Hikaru wants to reroute here, but look at this. 19 points of pressure barreling down the c-file there. Could be called an Alekhine's gun. I think the rook's in front, queen at the back is the classic Alekhine's gun, but it's the same kind of thing, or Aliekin, however you should say his name. Now Hikaru rerouting here, but Magnus hits that long chocolate slide, gives up his bishop. To be fair, that knight was a monster, so understandable, and now he breaks in the centre here. And it doesn't look like it should be possible, but this bishop hiding away down here can move backwards, of course. It's very unpleasant. The f-pawn defended, queen b7 played, Magnus just creeping his way in here and setting up threats. You know, if you get a bit casual, move a pawn or something, the rook's just going to crash through. Forced to recaptures, everything collapses. So Hikaru desperately tries to hold it together. Rook c4 threatens to rotate the bishop into the attack, and Hikaru does a runner with the king here. If, by the way, you just try and play for some kind of pawn storm over there, well, then there's this idea. Rook goes somewhere, let's say, to cover this mating square, but now takes. You crash through. These are some of the themes in the position. Not even rook takes. You can mate with the queen. So, no pawn h3. Instead, we had king d2 played here, and now you could immediately play bishop e4. White actually has to give up the queen there. Best way to play. But Magnus wanted more here. It's a great move, best move, but he felt that this, queen e5, and this actually gives him more control. Shedding a pawn with check, but now erecting this monster bishop. It's really a bit of a pope, and so many threats still around the king. This one kind of firing into blank air. So rook e to e3 was played. If you tried to move that rook, you were getting mated, a hunt, an attack. So this one was now played. The queen gives ground. Rook f6 just defends the f-pawn, keeps an eye on any perpetual check ideas, and after rook d6, trying to remove the defender, Magnus does oblige, queen recaptures, but in doing so, in removing that defender, look at this now. The epic king hunt is on. Takes on h2. The queen re-centralizes. But after rook c6, swinging around, we get bishop d6, intercepting that move, and bang. Final move of the game. The bishop left the defense. Now Audrey the a-pawn running down the board, and there's really nothing to be done. The king is safe. The pawns are cemented. Magnus in the powerful, dominant attacking position. And with this final move here, he takes home 3rd place and a check for 100k, I think. Niemann takes 140 in 2nd, and of course Levon wins it as mentioned, 200k. Hell of a prize fund for a chess tournament. Hope you enjoyed. Freestyle's not my favourite, I'll be honest, and by the views I see on these videos, not everyone else's either, but it's the top stars, right? We'll keep giving it a go, but I will be back to some proper chess tomorrow, maybe some Title Tuesday action. Do hit subscribe. Thanks very much for watching, and see you soon. Cheers.